Hi, so my name is Andrew Maitland and I'm a Senior Policy Officer at the Greater London Authority.
Thank you very much. And why did you decide to study politics and international relations at the University of Aberdeen?
So it wasn't actually my original plan when I came to study. Originally I was accepted to study history and English at university, but then it was a case of sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with my long-term career, and I was quite interested sort of like, especially at the time, Foreign Office and general sort of like government and public policy. I thought they were like an area that I could get a clear career in and sort of do it in an area that I was interested in. So I decided to make the change, first of all doing to history and politics, and then just purely focusing on politics, just because it covered more of the areas that I was interested in and I thought would be more of a better direction for my career.
Interesting. And did you participate in any student societies or clubs or sports clubs?
Yeah, so there were two sort of main clubs that I was involved with where I was here. The sort of main one that I was quite involved with was the History Society. It's part of my legacy of originally starting off as a history student. I met a lot of very nice people there, had a lot of good events. So having been sort of involved in the organisation of that since the first year, I just carried on, and then when there was a vacancy for being president of the society, I took that on and ran the society for 2 years before leaving. I was also involved with the badminton society as well. So at the time ran at the sports village. So yeah, I was doing that once or twice a week. It was just a nice opportunity to exercise and meet other people. In fact, two people that I made friends with then, I'm actually catching up with this week in Aberdeen. So a successful bit of engagement.
Interesting. And how did your academic background at Aberdeen and later at Bristol prepare you for your career in public policy?
Yeah, so I think certainly with Aberdeen, I think my undergraduate gave me like a large scope of different areas to sort of consider. I definitely was able to identify several areas that overall I found quite interesting in politics. And then move to Bristol sort of was quite useful as well, because it helped me sort of, I was aware that I was quite keen to work in government at that point in my career. And I think the public policy course that I did was quite useful. The fact that it introduced me to the sort of specific areas that I was quite interested in. Like I took some modules relating to like tackling poverty and inequality, the labour market, and I sort of started to change my focus and think that I was quite interested in this area and would quite like to develop more skills in it, and potentially that could be a good option for my career.
Interesting. And could you please summarize your career and key milestones which led you to your current role as a senior policy officer?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I did after I finished my master's was I did an Erasmus placement in the Budapest Institute for Policy Analysis, which is a think tank in Hungary. It was sort of a combination of things. That my partner is Hungarian and she wanted to go back to Budapest for a couple of months before moving back to the UK. So it was an opportunity to go live in this amazing, beautiful city for 4 months. And at the time, the UK was still in the EU, so I was able to apply for an Erasmus grant, get funding to go and work in this institute for 4 months. And that was quite pivotal in my career direction as well, because I think I really got a strong insight into what labour market policy looked like. Learning about skills and how it could really have a big impact on people who are disadvantaged, and that was quite sort of educational in my direction of where I was going in my career. Following that, I spent a period of time back at Aberdeen living with my parents trying to find a job, and it was a case that the first job I was able to successfully get was a position at the I always forget the name of it, it's such a long name, International Centre for Policy Studies, specifically within their Public Policy Exchange Department. And there was an organisation we're very much dedicated to creating events connected to public policy. So as sort of my role, I was sort of running a series of forums, usually at least one every week, which ran on a variety of different policy topics, from things like very sort of local issues like recycling and tackling waste, to bigger issues like international security, and basically running these events, trying to attract a number of different speakers to them. And then the idea was to make the events as interesting as possible, to try and attract as many people, and I guess for the sake of getting as much money for the company as possible in that respect. So that was an interesting one, and certainly introduced me to sort of engaging with a wide variety of different stakeholders, from like local government to charities to national politicians who all came to speak or attend our events. So that was quite educative. Then my next move after that was into the civil service. So I applied to the government fast stream program and got all the way to the end of the program, but didn't quite pass the last assessment centre. So instead of getting onto the fast stream, I was instead offered a position, just like a regular role within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which no longer exists. It's now the Department for Business and Trade. And I was invited to join a team called the Priority Projects Unit. Basically what we did was that we would go into different parts of the department for periods of 3 to 6 months and provide additional support to other teams who were perhaps a bit short on staff. And then I did that for about a year and a half. It was definitely interesting, and I certainly went into a lot of different policy areas that I didn't know much about, like electric vehicles or the sort of power grid system in the UK. It definitely sort of strengthens your competencies having to go from one occupation to another within a short period of time. So it was quite challenging. So then after that, I was able to get another role at the Department for Work and Pensions after that. In that position, I was largely focusing on tackling sort of labour market problems in the hospitality and retail sectors, because we'd just come out of COVID at the time, and there were a lot of vacancies in the sectors that just weren't getting filled. So my job really was to try and tackle the barriers to people getting into those sectors, which was interesting but definitely challenging, given that those sectors aren't paying very highly. There's a lot of job insecurity, so it was really trying to sort of work with business to try and make their offer to job seekers more appealing, really. And then most recently I moved across to work in the Greater London Authority, which, although very similar to the civil service, isn't technically part of government. It's a devolved authority, and my role there is very much again about sort of labour market and skills, with a specific focus in 2 areas. First of all, around improving apprenticeship take-up in London, as it's the region of England that has the lowest level of apprenticeship take-up per capita. And then also looking at devolution, because the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is very keen to try and get additional powers to make the changes for Londoners that he feels that national government isn't necessarily delivering effectively in the capital. So we're currently trying to work on a strategy to secure further devolution of employment and skills powers to London that will hopefully increase the skills levels of average Londoners and hopefully get them more opportunities to work in good employment.
Yes. So you have a very interesting experience, or career and experience. Could you please share a specific project or initiative you're particularly proud of in your career?
Yeah, so there's one that I'm working on at the moment within the GLA called Early Connect, which is a program that's being funded by ourselves and the Department for Education, which is around the sort of theme of apprenticeships, because we're aware that there's a lot of young Londoners who want to get into an apprenticeship after leaving school. A lot of people who just choose not to go to university, but they find it very difficult because they're competing against people who are older, have a lot more experience. So what we're trying to do with this program is provide them some sort of level of support to be able to apply and interview successfully for an apprenticeship opportunity. So we're working with an external organisation called Renova, who provides sort of like one-to-one support and guidance for young Londoners who have registered to this program, helping them prepare their CV, practice for job interviews and generating sort of more awareness of the kind of jobs that young people can go into when they leave school. And it's been quite successful so far. We've supported 1,300 young Londoners with their ambitions. We're still waiting to find out the final numbers of people who move into apprenticeships, but nonetheless, we're feeling that even if they haven't secured an apprenticeship, this will improve the sort of readiness for these individuals to go into work and hopefully be able to get something that suits their interests in the long run.
Wow, that's very impressive. Well done. And how do your technical skills in tools like Jamovi and R contribute to your work in public policy analysis and development?
So this is something skills I've developed quite recently, actually. So I did a part-time university course last year around social research methods, where I did quite a lot of work around like R and coding and stuff like that, and seeing how it could be applied to sort of research analysis. So this is something I'm working to try and integrate more into my sort of day-to-day policy work. I'm hoping once we get some more data of the things that we've been doing with the Department of Education, and I'm currently developing a survey with some of the participants of Early Connect, that I can take this data and sort of provide a bit more in-depth analysis as to who's specifically being helped by this program, kind of information around like certain backgrounds or sort of outcomes that are better than others. And I think things like that are really useful. That there's often quite a strong division in policy teams between people who work just on policy and those who are like data analysts and very specialised in looking at policy data. And I think it would be useful for the average policy person to be able to integrate more data into their approach so they have a better understanding of what's going on, how effective policy is without necessarily having to ask someone else. And I hope that's something that we can adapt in my own programme and learn from some of the experiences we've had.
Interesting. And with your certification as a qualified mental health first aider, how have you integrated mental health considerations into your policy work?
Yeah, so this is something I've definitely been quite conscious of. So for me, when it came to some of the things I was doing in the Department for Work and Pensions, I think we had to try and take into consideration the variety of needs that people working DWP had. A lot of job seekers do face a higher level of mental illness or other sort of physical conditions as well, which impede them from working. And I think one of the things that the department as a whole was trying to work towards was trying to encourage a level of flexibility amongst employers to ensure that they were providing opportunities for people who are either physically or mentally less able to perform certain roles. And I think one of the things that I think the new government is trying to look at is around trying to provide more of a focus around getting people into the kind of jobs that suit their well-being needs and not just get them into any job as soon as possible, which was a previous mantra of the last government. So I think by sort of encompassing that, that's something that everyone at all different skill levels and skill policy areas can try and make sure that people who have mental health conditions are in work that's not going to make their mental health worse, and hopefully stop them dropping out of their jobs again and keep them somewhere that's good for them, really.
Very interesting. And what strategies do you find effective for engaging stakeholders across the public, private and non-profit sectors in policy discussions?
So the sort of consideration with that is, I think, obviously when you're dealing with external stakeholders, they're not just talking to you for the sake of being nice, they have interests as well. And I think the important thing when engaging with them is to sort of understand what do they want and how can we work with them to find some sort of level of compromise between meeting their interests and meeting what the public's interests are as a whole. And usually there's some sort of middle ground that you can find. It's just about trying to have those discussions and sort of seeing where there's red lines the government policy can be changed, and where there is elements to compromise so that you can work most effectively with especially businesses but also other stakeholders to try and find some sort of agreement.
Interesting. And what advice do you have for students who are aspiring to work in public policy, and maybe there are some books or networks or podcasts you would particularly recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it is difficult because obviously it's such a broad range of things that are going on. I think the advice I would give is for sort of people to understand like a rough sort of area they are interested in and to try and accrue some level of knowledge or background experience in that area. So for example, if someone was interested in tackling homelessness, for example, if they wanted to work in that kind of field, then getting some sort of experience, like real world experience of volunteering with people who are homeless or charities that engage with the homeless is fantastic. And then just trying to upskill your knowledge, because obviously you come across as far more impressive in an interview if you have a good command and understanding of your subject area. So, I mean, there's so many resources online like YouTube and even TikTok, stuff like that. There's so much information out there. So just learn as much about your area as possible and think how you can make a difference in that area and what makes you stand out compared to others.
Interesting. And apart from studying and attending different societies, what are some of your favorite moments from Aberdeen, like from social life?
Oh, I mean, one of the things I loved about studying here was that I made so many good friends, many of whom I'm still in contact with. Majority of them from people that I met in halls. I lived in Johnston Halls in first year, and I think we just had a great time, like just being in that environment, being around people who were sort of similar in interest and the same stuff as myself, having that, I guess, freedom to go out and just enjoy yourself was great. So I had a lot of very fun nights out and like going out for food or whatever with my friends, and also the people I met through the History Society as well were great. A lot of people with similar interests. And I think one of the things the university does really well is trying to provide access to things like, for example, sport is a great way to try and meet people. Like I mentioned badminton before. I was able to play a lot of football during my time at the uni, going to the sports village and playing like in 7-a-side teams. And that was just a great way of like, meeting people, and given the fact it's cheaper relatively for students, it makes it a lot more accessible, which I think is a great thing.
Interesting. And the last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
The last question for myself is, I think, I suppose it's about trying to have that longer term vision of what you would want to do, really. I think it's difficult sometimes to try and work towards a goal if you're not sort of thinking about all the individual steps, because it's fine to think, oh, I want to work in whatever place in the long run, but if you aren't doing the small steps in between then and now to get there, then it's a lot harder. So I would say to myself to sort of think about what sort of things would be best for developing career and not necessarily like the easiest thing to do, because sometimes you do need to put yourself out of your comfort zone. So yeah, I think just trying new things, meeting new people and asking questions and learning as much as you can is always a good approach.